Most veterans think if their claim gets denied, that's the end of the road, or at best just the beginning of another frustrating uphill battle. But what if I told you that one veteran changed everything with a single phrase? Not a legal argument, not a new doctor's note, just one sentence that forced the VA to take a second look and completely reverse their decision. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't luck. It was a moment of clarity. When he realized the system wasn't just looking for pain scores or medical labels, it was listening for something else entirely. And once he said it the right way, the results were undeniable. If you're stuck in the appeal process, confused about why your claim isn't moving or wondering what the VA really cares about, stay with me, because this isn't just about one veteran. It's about what you can learn from his strategy and apply to your own case, starting today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what he said, why it worked, and how to use the same approach in your appeal, even if your doctor disagrees, even if you've been denied before, and even if you feel like nobody's listening. Let's get into it. The veteran's name was Marcus, a former Army mechanic, quiet, disciplined, never one to complain. After serving 2 tours overseas, he came back with chronic back pain, nerve damage in his legs, and something even harder to explain, an overwhelming sense that he wasn't being heard. He filed his claim like he was told, listed his symptoms. Went to the C&P exam. The doctor barely made eye contact, ran through a checklist, asked him how bad the pain was on a scale of 1 to 10, and then marked it down. Moderate. No further discussion. That word, moderate, would cost Marcus everything. The VA came back with a low rating, not enough to reflect the daily pain that made it hard to work, drive, or even sleep. But when Marcus appealed, something shifted. He didn't send in new scans. He didn't submit a different diagnosis. He changed how he described his condition. Instead of focusing on pain level or diagnoses, Marcus said this: "This condition affects every part of my life, my ability to earn a living, to be present with my kids, to live without fear of my body giving out. It's not just pain, it's a loss of function. It's a loss of who I was." That one phrase, loss of function, is what changed everything. Because the VA isn't just rating your condition by how much it hurts. They're looking at how much it limits your life, how it affects your work, your mobility, your relationships, your independence. And Marcus had finally said it in their language. The next time the VA reviewed his appeal, they saw more than symptoms. They saw impact. And just like that, his rating went from 10% to 70%. Same body, same diagnosis, but a completely different outcome. And that wasn't the only surprise in Marcus's story. Marcus's case revealed something that most veterans don't realize. Your words matter more than you think. The way you describe your condition can either open the VA's eyes or keep them shut. And the most common mistake? Using clinical terms instead of personal impact. When Marcus first filed, he repeated what he'd been told: degenerative disc disease, sciatic nerve pain, chronic stiffness. But that's exactly what the VA expects. Textbook phrases that don't paint a real picture. It's not that they're ignoring you. It's that they're not hearing anything new. But in his appeal, Marcus started describing the daily effects. He wrote about how he had to leave work early because his legs would go numb, how he missed his daughter's recital because the pain made it impossible to sit for more than 15 minutes, how he couldn't even tie his shoes without bracing against the wall. Suddenly, the VA reviewers weren't just reading a file. They were seeing a person. This was the shift, from diagnosis to disruption. The VA doesn't assign percentages based on what condition you have. They assign them based on how that condition disrupts your life. A veteran with the same medical label as you could get a 70% rating while you're stuck at 10%, all because they used phrases that clearly showed limitations, not just labels. And once Marcus understood that, his appeal wasn't just stronger, it became undeniable. But the real power came when he started using one specific phrase, and we'll get to that next. The phrase that changed everything? This condition affects me more than the rating reflects. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but in Marcus's appeal, that one sentence reframed his entire case. Why? Because it did two things at once. First, it called out the obvious, that the current VA rating wasn't capturing the full reality. Second, it forced the reviewer to reconsider whether the assigned percentage truly matched the evidence. Marcus didn't stop there. He backed it up with details, using that phrase as a signal to dig deeper. He wrote, "This condition affects me more than the rating reflects because I can't sit for longer than 20 minutes without pain shooting down my leg. It wakes me up 3 times a night. I've stopped driving long distances because I can't feel my feet." That phrase acted like a spotlight, and everything after it became undeniable proof. Here's what most veterans miss. The VA system is built around formulas, but formulas don't capture suffering. They measure symptoms, but they don't always recognize disruption, exhaustion, or isolation. When you use a phrase like, "This affects me more than the rating reflects," you're not just stating an opinion. You're issuing a challenge. You're saying, "The numbers don't match my life. Here's why." And when that statement is followed by detailed real-world limitations, it's hard for any reviewer to ignore. Marcus didn't add new medical evidence. He didn't hire a lawyer. He just told the truth, clearly and repeatedly, starting with one powerful sentence that made the VA look again. But what he discovered next made him realize just how many veterans might be getting overlooked, even when they say all the right things. The truth Marcus uncovered next was both frustrating and eye-opening. The VA doesn't just rely on what you say, it leans heavily on what's in your medical records. And if your daily struggles aren't documented in the exact way they expect, it's almost like they don't exist. He learned this the hard way. Despite his appeal, including vivid descriptions of pain, insomnia, limited mobility, and mental health strain, the VA still responded with a denial. The reason? Insufficient objective medical evidence. It didn't matter that Marcus had explained how his condition disrupted every part of his day. It didn't matter that his quality of life was clearly slipping. If those things weren't echoed in doctor's notes, progress reports, or consistent clinical language, the system dismissed them as anecdotal. That's when Marcus started tracking every symptom. He kept a daily log. He told his doctor word for word how his condition affected his work, sleep, relationships, and routines. He even printed out examples of how he couldn't lift his daughter without pain, or how walking to the mailbox left him winded and frustrated. Over time, his physician began including these functional limitations in his visit summaries. Phrases like reports increased pain after basic activity or difficulty sleeping due to chronic discomfort started showing up in his records, and that changed everything. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The VA's decision-makers don't always read your personal statements with the weight they deserve. They scan for keywords in medical files. If your suffering isn't reflected there, in the clinical language they trust, it can feel like your experience is being erased. Marcus realized that telling the truth wasn't enough. He had to make sure the truth showed up in black and white, in the places the VA actually looks. And once that happened, his case went from ignored to undeniable. But even then, one obstacle still stood in his way, and it had nothing to do with paperwork. The last hurdle Marcus faced wasn't buried in policy manuals or hidden in paperwork. It came from the people closest to him. When he started pushing back against the VA's decision, not everyone supported him. Some of his fellow veterans warned him not to stir the pot. They said, "Just take what you get, don't make it worse." Even a few family members quietly suggested that maybe he was expecting too much. At first, Marcus questioned himself. Was he being ungrateful? Was he overreacting? But deep down, he knew he wasn't asking for special treatment. He was asking for fairness. He wasn't trying to game the system. He was trying to survive within it. That's when he made a decision. He stopped apologizing for advocating for himself. He rewrote his appeal, this time using the exact phrase a former claims officer had shared with him, words that had shifted everything. The phrase was simple but powerful. My condition has worsened to the point of impacting my basic daily function and employment, and this is not adequately reflected in my current rating. Those few words, basic daily function and employment, hit a nerve in the right way. They weren't emotional, but they were personal. They translated his pain into language the system couldn't ignore. That one sentence reframed his entire claim. It wasn't just about symptoms anymore, it was about survival, his ability to work, to care for his family, and to live with dignity. And here's the truth. Sometimes all it takes is one clear, strategic phrase to change how your story is heard. Not just louder, but sharper. The people who told Marcus to give up, they were operating from fear. But Marcus had finally stepped into something deeper than frustration. He'd stepped into clarity. And that's when everything started to shift. But there was still one final surprise in store. Because once the appeal was approved, the outcome wasn't what Marcus expected. When the letter finally arrived in the mail, Marcus expected another rejection, or maybe a small increase that didn't really change much. But what he saw stopped him cold. The VA had not only approved his appeal, they had backdated his rating and issued retroactive pay going back over 2 years. Thousands of dollars suddenly in his bank account. But more than the money, what hit him hardest was what the new rating represented. Acknowledgement. For the first time in years, Marcus felt seen, not as a number or a case file, but as a person whose struggle had weight. And strangely, that validation brought a wave of emotion he didn't expect. Relief, yes, but also grief for how long he'd gone unheard. He wasn't just fighting for more money, he'd been fighting to be believed. That's something many veterans don't say out loud, but it's real. The silent burden of feeling dismissed, overlooked, or judged can be heavier than the condition itself. Marcus thought about all the times he'd sat in silence during appointments, trying to stay composed, trying not to sound like he was exaggerating. All the nights he couldn't sleep because of the pain, both physical and emotional. And suddenly, it hit him. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every veteran who'd ever been told their word wasn't enough. That phrase he had learned, it gave structure to his experience. It translated his reality into language the system understood. And that's when it clicked. Sometimes the VA doesn't reject you because you don't qualify. They reject you because you're not speaking their language. This entire journey had taught Marcus something vital. Winning an appeal isn't about being louder. It's about being clearer. It's about turning vague pain into undeniable proof. And once you do that, you're not just playing defense anymore. You're rewriting the rules. But for Marcus, there was still one decision left to make. One that would change not just his life, but the lives of others watching quietly from the sidelines. Instead of quietly walking away with his upgraded rating, Marcus did something most veterans never even consider. He started sharing exactly what worked, not just the outcome, but the process. He began posting in online forums explaining how he rewrote his appeal using that one phrase. He even uploaded a template of his letter, blacking out personal details, but keeping the language intact. And within weeks, something unexpected happened. Messages started pouring in from other veterans. Some were just saying thank you, others were asking for help. A few had already used his advice and were stunned to see progress in their own cases. One of them, a Marine named Jake, had been denied 3 times for his back condition. After seeing Marcus's post, he rewrote his appeal and added the same key phrase Marcus had used. Due to the chronic and progressively worsening nature of this condition, I am unable to sustain gainful employment without accommodations. 6 weeks later, Jake got his approval. Another vet, a 100% disabled Army retiree, had been denied caregiver support. After rewording his statement using Marcus's structure, he not only got approved, he got back pay. Marcus never expected to become an advocate. But the ripple effect of one carefully chosen phrase was undeniable. It was never about gaming the system. It was about learning how to speak truth in a way the system could finally hear. He had taken years of frustration and turned it into a bridge for others still stuck on the other side. And while some people still doubted the power of a single sentence, Marcus had already seen the results firsthand. His case had changed. His confidence had changed. And now, so were the lives of people he'd never even met. But his story still wasn't finished. Because as more veterans reached out, Marcus realized something even bigger was at stake. And it wasn't just about disability ratings anymore. The truth is, Marcus's journey started like so many others, confused, frustrated, and doubting whether the system would ever hear him. But once he discovered how to reframe his appeal with clarity, honesty, and the right language, everything shifted, not just for him, but for everyone who followed his lead. And maybe that's the real lesson here, that the words you choose don't just tell your story. They shape how it's received, how it's understood, and how it's acted on. If you're a veteran watching this and you've felt dismissed, ignored, or stuck in a loop of denials, know this: you are not the problem. The system is complex, but that doesn't mean you're powerless. The way you tell your truth matters. And sometimes, one small change in how you phrase it is all it takes to finally be heard. So if there's one thing to take from this story, it's this: don't give up. Don't assume a denial means you're wrong or that your service doesn't count. If Marcus had accepted that first answer, he'd still be fighting in silence today. Instead, he learned to speak up differently. And now, he's not just getting the support he deserves. He's helping others do the same. We hope this video gave you something real to think about, and maybe even a step forward in your own process. If it did, let us know. Drop a comment below with one thing that stood out to you or how you plan to apply it. We read every message, and your voice genuinely matters here. And if you haven't yet, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us reach more veterans, share more stories like this, and bring real value to those who need it most. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.